In today's video, we're going to be going over 27 guitar terms that you need to know. And if you're a beginner and you're brand new to the guitar, then make sure you stay tuned to the end because you need to know every single one of the things in this video. All right, let's get started. The first thing you need to know is the pickup. Now, the pickup is exactly what it sounds like. It's the thing that picks up the sound of the strings and sends it to the amplifier. Now on most guitars there's two pickups, a neck pickup and a bridge pickup. And if you don't know what the neck and the bridge are, then keep watching because we're gonna cover that in just a second. Number two is the amplifier. The amplifier is what we plug an electric guitar into to make the sound loud, hence the word amplifier. It amplifies the sound. I would say having a really good amplifier is actually more important than having a really good guitar because the sound that you hear is only going to be as good as the amplifier that you plug it into. Number three is the 1/4 inch cable. The 1/4 inch cable has been the standard for decades for plugging an electric guitar into anything else, including an amplifier. Having good cables is important because if your cables are bad, they can start to make crackling noises and they can just break and stop working. And you really don't want that to happen while you're playing on stage, do you? Number four is the output jack. The output jack is exactly where we plug our 1/4 inch cable into on the guitar. Now this sounds fairly trivial, but it's actually really important to have a good output jack on your guitar because like with the cables, there can actually be some problems that happen with output jacks, like them getting loose or connections coming off. And if you have a problem with your output jack, that can completely destroy everything you're trying to do. Number five is the neck of the guitar. The neck is this part that sticks out of the guitar and basically has everything that goes on with the guitar happen on it. This is where the strings go over and where all kinds of other awesome stuff happens. Also going back to the pickups, we call the pickup that's closest to the neck of the guitar the neck pickup. Next we have the fretboard / the fingerboard. Now these are pretty much interchangeable terms and this is just the surface of the neck where the strings run over and where you press your fingers down on to play the guitar. Next we have fret. Frets are these metal wires that are inlaid and hammered in to the fretboard, and that's exactly what helps us to find where different notes are on the guitar and helps us place our fingers correctly to play the things that we want to. Next we have fretting, and all that means is when you push your fingers down on a string on any fret so that you can play a note or a chord. Next is the fretting hand. So for right-handed guitarists, the fretting hand is almost always going to be your left hand. And for left-handed guitarists, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be your right hand. Next is the pick. Now, it's this little plastic thing here, and this is what most guitarists use to pick and strum the strings of the guitar to get it to make sound. Also, in Britain, they call it a plectrum. I don't call it a plectrum, however, I just call it a pick. Next, we have the bridge of the guitar. The bridge is the part that holds the strings in place on the body of the guitar. So on this guitar, the bridge is located right here, and you have these bridge saddles where each string goes through. And the strings actually are fed through the back of the guitar body and right through those holes and through these bridge saddles where they're supported nicely. There's tons of different types of bridges that you can find in different guitars, particularly in acoustic guitars. They're far different than the bridge on an electric guitar. Next, we have the nut of the guitar. The nut is the part at the end of the neck that supports the strings and has slots that the strings are fed through. The nut actually seems like it's something that's pretty inconsequential, but the nut is actually super duper important when it comes to the tuning of the guitar. That brings us to tuning. The tuning is the pitch or note that each string is set to. So standard tuning of a guitar sounds like this. And that's what your guitar should sound like when you strum all the strings open like that. One thing to note is that tuning is a very fine and precise adjustment that needs to be made every single time you play your guitar. And if your tuning's off just by a little bit, that can be enough to make everything that you play on the guitar sound bad. Next, we have the headstock. The headstock is the very end of the guitar, which houses the tuning pegs and tuning knobs. The headstock is also critically important actually to the aesthetic of the guitar, because every single guitar company has their own signature headstock that they like to use on the overwhelming majority of their guitars. Next is the action. This is a really important term to remember, because action is the distance between the strings on your guitar and the fretboard. And a higher action means that the strings are further away from the fretboard, and a lower action means that they're closer. And most of the time, people want to set their action as low as possible without getting problems with the sound of the guitar. Because if you set it too low, you can actually have buzzing of the strings being too close to the frets of the guitar. But the lower your action is, the easier it's going to be to play the guitar, because you don't have to push your fingers or apply as much pressure to play each note or chord that you want to play. The action of the guitar is determined by a few different things, but one of the main things that's involved in it is our next term, which is the truss rod of the guitar. The truss rod is actually a rod that runs through the center of the neck, and the purpose of it is to create counter tension against the strings, which are pulling the headstock of the guitar forward. So the truss rod helps keep the neck nice and straight and not let it get bent by the strings. The way you adjust the truss rod is going to be different on a lot of different guitars. On this guitar, it's actually this hole by the nut where you can actually stick an Allen key in there, turn it, and adjust the truss rod. Some other guitars, though, are a bit harder to adjust it, and chances are you won't really have to adjust it. You should get a professional to do that for you. Next, we have the volume knob. This guitar has two knobs. This one here is the volume knob. So if I turn this all the way to the right, we're at full volume. And then I'll play a note and start rolling it down. You'll see that it will get quieter. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that actually rolling down the volume knob does change the sound of the guitar a bit as well. It doesn't purely lower the volume, but being able to feel where the volume knob is on your guitar without thinking about it too much is pretty important for being able to play with a band where you need to control your levels. Next, we have the tone knob. The tone knob on the guitar controls what is called the tone, and this can be a little bit confusing. Essentially, the tone setting on the tone knob controls how much of the high frequency sounds are let through the pickups. As you make the tone knob lower and lower, it'll actually kind of sound like the guitar is underwater, and it'll sound much more muddy. Let's take a listen. So I hope that you can hear that it sounds much more muffled, and like I said, kind of sounds like it's underwater. And when the tone knob is all the way up, it sounds much brighter. So talking about the tone knob and the high frequencies being let through is a great way to segue into our next term, which is EQ. And EQ is short for equalization. And equalization is essentially the same type of thing that we're talking about with the tone knob, manipulating the sound and how many frequencies are let through and how loud they are, except that we can adjust it for the whole entire frequency spectrum. Typically, this is done on your amplifier or on a pedal, or it can be done in computer software after you record guitars. The most basic type of EQ is found on most amps, which is having a low, middle, and a high knob. And for me personally, I think that the best idea is to try to get a balance of all three of those. However, the way the different guitarists are going to set the EQ is going to be totally different depending on who it is and what gear they're playing on and how they play and touch the instrument. And it's a very important aspect of your own personal sound as a guitarist. Next thing we have are effects. Effects change the sound that comes out of the amplifier when you play something into the guitar. The overwhelming majority of the time, effects are going to be added to your sound by using something like effects pedals. Effects pedals, you plug your guitar into the pedal, and then it does its magic, adds the effect to the sound, and then it sends that sound out of the pedal and into the guitar amplifier. Some super common effects are distortion, reverb, and delay. Effects are obviously one of the coolest parts about playing the guitar. Some amplifiers also come with built-in effects, and that could be a really great option if you're just starting out to get an amplifier like that. Next is bending. Bending is a technique for playing the guitar, and it's one of the really cool, unique things that we can do on a guitar, and it's when we play a note and then push the string upward to make another note sound, like this. Now, bends can be really challenging for a while because you need to be able to get them in tune. And just like how I was talking about with the tuning of the guitar, if it's off by just a little bit, it can result in the note sounding bad. So a quick tip for practicing bends is you could play a note, and then play another note on the same string that's higher up the guitar fretboard. And by the way, higher means this way, towards the pickups of the guitar, because the pitch is going higher. And then bending up to that note. Next is a hammer-on. A hammer-on is when you play a note on a string by picking it, and then play another note on the same string by striking one of your fingers down. And it looks like this. You're hammering your finger on the string. Next we have pull-off. Pull-off is like the opposite of hammer-on, where instead of hammering on our finger to the string on a higher note, we're actually pulling one of our fingers off and landing on a lower note while only picking the string one time, like this. Now, one thing that's really important to know about pull-offs is that the name is a little misleading because it makes it seem like you just pull your finger off the string, something like this. I'm just lifting my finger off the string, but that's not actually how you really want to play them. What you want to think about is actually pulling downwards so that you actually almost like pick the string with your finger, not with the guitar pick. That way you actually get a very clear sound on the second note. If you just lift your finger off, you're not going to get a clear sound, and the next note is going to sound way quieter than the first one. And the last thing we'll cover in this video is a slide. So a slide, similar to the previous techniques, only requires one pick on the string, but we just take the same finger and move it up the fretboard. So we take advantage of the fact that the string is still vibrating and we can just move our finger wherever, and it sounds really cool because it sounds like the two notes that you're playing are connected. So if you're looking to get a jump start on your guitar playing and learn right from the start how to navigate the fretboard with ease and make sense of it all and master it eventually, then make sure you head on over to Jamsville.com and check out the Jamsville Guitar Performance System Fretboard Fundamentals course. This course provides you everything you need in a step-by-step, easy-to-follow system so that by the time you're done with it, you're going to feel complete confidence and mastery over the guitar fretboard. All right, everybody, until next time, listen, learn, and jam.